Good morning, everyone. As Simone says, I'm Rowena Langston, and I was one of the founder trustees of the Little Ouse Headwaters project. So today I thought I'd start by giving you a bit of background and then tell you something about the mammal studies that we're undertaking. You've already heard the name Arthur Rivet mentioned. You'll see and hear more about Arthur during this presentation, as it's all his fault we have a mammal study group. So the Little Ouse Headwaters project was established as a charitable company in 2002, building on the work of two voluntary groups on their respective village fens along the Little Ouse. And all of the dark green areas on here are sites that the Little Ouse Headwaters project manages either under management or lease. So the aim of our project was to reconnect and restore remnant fragments of Valley Fen along the upper Little Ouse on the Norfolk-Suffolk border. And to help those of you who are less familiar with this area, although I don't have a pointer, the extreme right-hand side, the paler green, is Suffolk Wildlife Trust's Redgrave and Lopham Fen National Nature Reserve on the Waveney. And then you're looking westwards along the Little Ouse. And you'll notice two more pale green areas there in a block of multiple sites, which are also managed by the Suffolk Wildlife Trust, such that now, between the two organisations, we manage the whole of the former extent of Felneatham Fen. And we're now carrying out some joint work parties in that area towards restoring these sites. So some of the work that we've been doing by way of restoration is work on the ditch systems within the sites and even along the main watercourse of the river. And a few years ago, Nigel Holmes came and did some of his in-channel restoration works along a stretch of about 1 kilometre of the Little Ouse River. And this helped to provide a more sinuous course and get better flow in a river that, fairly typically of many of the rivers in this area, had been historically over-deepened and straightened over many years. And this work has been very attractive to water voles. We had surveys by Penny Hemphill at the time, before this and during this work, and the water voles are now reaping benefits, and so are we for this highly protected species. So we then embarked on learning more about the appropriate signs to look for water vole so that we could continue to assess their occurrence along the sites that we manage. And this is really where we started the mammal study group under Arthur's tutelage. And last year we put some of this training into practice by taking part in the National Water Vole Survey. And here you see a group of us along one of our best water vole stretches. And these are the sorts of results that we were picking up from that survey. So high numbers of burrows in our 500-metre section. So these data have all gone to contribute to that national survey. And just to give an indication of the sort of information that's come back from PTES, of the 222 sites across the UK that were surveyed last year, water vole activity was detected at 82. If you then consider that in the context of just the sites in England, 56 of 130 sites surveyed with water vole, so just over 40%. So there's a lot of sites that still don't have water voles, and those that do, we want to try and ensure that they continue. The main study species that we focus on is otter. We were involved some years ago in trapping out mink in the valley, and we continue to maintain what we call mink rafts along the river at various points, and we've found these very useful monitoring tools because all sorts of wildlife uses them as an extra platform. They've also proved very useful as sprint collecting points, although we also collect from more natural habitats and river bridges, etc. So monitoring, survey, biological recording are all very important to the LOHP so that we can assess whether our management is heading in the right direction, and clearly the work that we're doing on otters is contributory to that. So we've been mentored by Richard Woolnough, who again has also been mentioned today, and Mark Smith, who've helped us develop the skills to identify the prey remains that we find in spraint. And we've been collecting spraint from the main sprainting locations. From looking on the east side, the red stars indicate this, on the Bottersdale Brook here, which is the origin of the Little Ouse River, down as far as Rushford, just the other side of the Euston Estate. So what's the purpose of all of this? Well, I've already indicated one of the main reasons to look at levels of activity in the valley and investigate diet of otters along the river and associated wetlands. Because obviously the otters that use our sites aren't just restricted to the river course. The prey remains are also quite a useful record of species that are occurring in the river and those associated wetlands. And we're aiming now to get monthly samples so that we can start to look at seasonal variation in diet and activity along the river. And these spraint analyses are augmented by a network of trail cameras, which can give us an idea of maybe how many otters we have in terms of identifying different individuals, but that's a whole different ball game. I don't know to what extent Nikki might pick up on that when she presents Richard's talk later today. But at least to give us some indication of whether we've got multiple individuals and whether they're successful in breeding or not. So here's Arthur collecting spraint from one of our most productive locations. A nice example of a fresh otter spraint, for those of you who are not so familiar, although it's a bit light in here to see well. And then a couple of members of our group, one of whom you will see here today, Richard Minter, here demonstrating the use of digital microscope, which has really transformed our ability to analyse these spraint, project our images, and then Arthur is involved in producing a revised guide to identification of the prey remains in spraint. And this is one of his photographs here showing perch scales and vertebrae. So very distinctive features that we can look for in our spraint samples. So what have we found? Well, perhaps not surprisingly, the top chart shows you the spread of prey types, and fish dominate in the spraint samples that we collect, with a spread of other groups. When we look at the fish in more detail, you can see that for us in the upper river channel, where it's quite a small river system, we're finding lots of bullhead and sticklebacks and reasonable numbers of perch, but mostly quite small fish, and a very notable absence of eel. For this reason and other work that we've been doing, we're now talking to the Environment Agency, along with others, about removing, or rather facilitating, fish passage higher upstream, because it's quite a way down to find eel, for example, which of course in its own right has a lot of interest for conservation. So at the moment we have just over 200 spraints included in these charts. Come the end of this year, we'll be reassessing where we are, hopefully analysing this in the context of seasonal variation, and then perhaps writing it up and deciding where we go next. Do we reduce our levels of monitoring, because it's quite intensive at the moment, and there are other projects we would like to at least collect some information on. Right, this is just one of the video clips You might hear some dawn chorus in the background. And this is the second proven example we've got of otter breeding somewhere. Obviously they move quite big distances, so they needn't necessarily have bred within our project area, but nonetheless this study, being one of several across Suffolk, is something that we collectively can find out rather more about the otters. And then finally, we are doing quite a lot of bat recording, bat monitoring. Here, Arthur, again. Some of the work that we're doing involves the checking of bat boxes in late summer, autumn, and we're also using static bat recorders as part of the British Trust for Ornithology's bat survey. Unfortunately, this is going to be a difficult one to see, but you'll have to believe me that there's a pole about this high with a microphone on the top and then the box of tricks at the bottom. And we're using this, we have a network of fixed monitoring sites around the Little Ouse project area where we deploy this throughout the spring and summer season. These records are sent to the BTO, as I say, as part of their survey, but we get that information back and it augments our other sources of records from using more conventional or traditional means of bat recording. And then just to show that we do actually find some bats, these are natterers from one of the box checks last year, and a close-up. And these are the bats that we've recorded in the project area so far. Most of these mentioned in Alan's talk a few minutes ago. So it just remains for me to say thank you for listening and to acknowledge the input of members of our mammal group, and at the bottom there, the 3 mentors and individuals who join our workshops and help point us in the right direction and have helped develop our skills over the last couple of years. So thank you very much.